Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about lumber, give you guys a bit of a lumber update and how lumber could be indicating a return of inflation. That's right, inflation could flare back up, and lumber could be the leading indicator that shows how inflation could come back to our economy, even though a lot of people feel that the Federal Reserve and the efforts coming from the rising of interest rates has put the damper on the demand out there coming from the consumer, and that the inflation scenario has passed and everything's coming back down to normal, whatever that's supposed to mean. I mean, I guess that's kind of a common narrative out there. I have been following lumber for a very long time. For those of you who don't know, I do work at a lumber yard. I do retail sales for a living. I've been in this industry since I was 18 years old. We're talking almost 30 years now. I know mills, I know truck drivers, I know people who log, I know distribution networks, wholesalers, retailers, customers. As far as contractors go, there's really no position within the lumber industry that I do not have some sort of access or understanding of. Now, when it comes to lumber, again, like I said, it is a very boring commodity right now. There is not a lot happening within the lumber industry that says, hey, come on, watch my video. Let me tell you about lumber. Let me give you all this information. It just doesn't really exist. There's nothing really there to talk about. However, if you have been following my channel for any length of time, you have heard me talk about the mill curtailments that have been taking place over the last few months. These are the mills who have slowed down on their production. They didn't have a lot of demand coming for their particular product. You saw the prices fall dramatically, and when those prices come down, this is really important to understand, that the mills don't necessarily want to be producing a lot of lumber at this lower price. They want to produce at a higher price. So when lumber ran up to $1,700 per thousand, they pumped out a lot of lumber. But when it's at $500 per thousand, their operating cost doesn't really make it conducive for them to be, producing a lot of product. So they keep the inventory very tight. This is really important to understand, because right now that tight inventory is starting to show itself within the market. This is one of the leading indicators that I had prior to the lumber shortage that we had experienced. I actually came out on George Gammon's channel trying to hold a little bit of information back on my channel so that I could present, this new information on George's channel with an interview I was doing with him. I called out the 4x4 pressure treated shortage that I had been experiencing, saying that it was leading into other products out there, and this is the cornerstone of any outdoor project. When I made that call about the lumber shortage taking place on George's channel, it just blew up after that. Every single newspaper within a couple of weeks across the country was talking about lumber shortages. But you heard it on George Gammon's channel first in an interview that I was doing with him, that the lumber shortage was about ready to hit in a major way, and I totally called that out. Now, what I'm experiencing right now, I think this is probably the most important information, and this is what everybody's looking for, is that the mill curtailment has brought inventory level down dramatically. Okay. Now, what that has left is that the pressure treated companies, right, or at least the one that I'm dealing with at this point. I mean, I don't know how far it's spread yet, but at least if I'm experiencing it with the one that I'm dealing with, then I'm sure the other ones are also experiencing it as well, as the shortages that start to occur with one vendor then start leading the demand into other vendors out there, right? So all of a sudden the amount of available supply out there begins to deplete pretty quickly once one vendor runs out. So this is what I'm experiencing right now. So 2x6 decking. Now this is like the pressure treated without the incisor marks, without the little holes poked in it. Typically used for deck boards. Now granted, the composite decking market is a lot more popular now than it had been in the previous years. But this outdoor, exterior type pressure treated lumber without the incisor marks is probably the most common type of deck board out there when it comes to just, building your average, outdoor project or something. This is the go-to. So it's in short supply right now. We cannot find it. Like, all lengths are gone except for, I think, 14 footers or something, which is a very uncommon length. If you work construction, you would know like 14s and 18s are the most uncommon length out there. So it makes sense that there's a supply of 14 still left, 14 footers, but 8s, 10s, 12s, 16s, 20 footers, gone. They're all gone, right? And so when you ask, hey, when are you getting more? They don't know. The mills are not producing the premium grade. Now, this is something interesting to think about, because there's a couple of things that are starting to happen here, right? Now, there's nowhere you can go to get this information. This is all anecdotal. right? I mean, but you're going to have to trust me on it. You know, and I'm not saying trust me to the point that I would say go and do investments. I would say trust me on to the point that you should keep your eyes open in your local area for signs of similar things that are taking place. That's what I'm saying trust me on, right? This information is not to be traded with. It's not to use for investment purposes. It's for entertainment. But if you use the information and go and see for yourself in your local area, you might find that some of these things are occurring in your area as well. So now this is really what's taken place, is that the demand for the products coming from the mills is not that of what you would use to make the outdoor wood, the exterior stuff, right? This deck boards. The stuff that the mill is running, or most mills are running right now, or the premium product that is being pushed out, or I shouldn't say the premium, the higher demand product that is being pushed out, is the standard and better 2x4, 2x6 plate stock and stud length material. This is what you would use to frame with, like the most common framing lumber for building a home with, you know. So if that is what's in demand, then that is what the mills are going to be producing. Even though there's shortages of this other types of material, and when it comes to like this deck boards, it's a higher grade, a premium grade, right? So it's like selected for appearance, right? It has less like bark edges. They call that wane, bark wane on the side of it. Less edge knots. There's less, you know, issues taking place because it's made for more of an appearance grade. However, if the mills aren't running it, then you can't treat it, can't sell it, right? And this is one of the things that we are facing today. So is it the same as what we had experienced in the past? No, not exactly, right? It's like, you know, before there was mill curtailments taking place due to, you know, a change in the way that the Canadian government was charging for stumpage fees. There was the salvage mode taking place. There was a whole lot of issues that were happening prior to the pandemic that created the situation that caused lumber to rise so dramatically. We're not facing those type of situations today, right? There's a much different situation that is happening now, but it's somewhat similar in the response to like the mills and the inventory levels, and then the reflection of it back here, you know, on the retail side of things when I'm trying to sell the lumber and can't find it anymore. So now what does this say, right? If you have any demand that starts to pick up in lumber, now remember there's two types of demand. There's elastic and inelastic demand. Elastic demand is when the guy says, ooh, man, no, I'm postponing, I'm going to postpone the remodel. I'm going to postpone the fence package. I'm going to postpone that because I don't like what's going on with the lumber prices, or, you know, something going on. Maybe interest rates are going to get better, or I'm going to borrow the money to do it. There's all kinds of these factors that start playing in. That's elastic demand. May or may not do the project. Inelastic demand is when a guy signs a contract saying, yeah, I'll build this thing, let's go for it, let's do it, and then realizes that there's nothing available out there. That demand is inelastic, right? Like when they sign the contract saying, I'll do the project, but then go to buy the material and can't find it. This is inelastic demand. They need that material. They will pay any price for it. Unlike the guy who can postpone it, this guy can't. Right? And so depending on how much inelastic demand occurs within the lumber industry over the next few months will determine on how high those prices are going to go. With the idea, with the concept, with the perception, with the credible threat that the Federal Reserve is going to be lowering interest rates going into the future, this generally is going to be pushing the idea that maybe building a house is appropriate now. Right? Now, I'm not trying to say that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying that that could be a perception coming into the future, especially coming from the speculation side of things. If I build a house today, can I sell it for the price that I am expecting to coming in the future, or is the housing prices going to drop? Or is the buyer going to be there? All these questions begin to come up when you think about where it is that the demand is going to be. Right. So I'm not trying to confuse anybody or make it more complicated than it needs to be, but there's a lot of working parts that are taking place within this. Right. And people ask me all the time, where's lumber prices? Where are they going to go? What's going to happen? This is how we figured this stuff out. Right. This is how I figured it out last time was like, man, there's shortages happening. There's this inelastic demand. All these people are walking in with stimulus checks. Right. All these things were taking place before. And that gave it a clear view for me to call out the lumber market, right? Right now, I don't see a lot of people walking in. Like the retail side of things, like retail is dying on the vine. When they talk about like we're going to miss the recession, I don't know. You talk to some of the guys that I work with right now and they are like, man, this is worse than the great financial crisis. Literally, this is worse than the great financial crisis, that what we are experiencing right now. And so if this is going to last for any length of time, I can only assume that we are going to be running into inflationary scenarios, or not inflation, but recessionary scenarios, right? Now, if we do have a situation in which that the recession doesn't occur, right? That doesn't happen, and that demand going into lumber starts to pick up, right? We are going to see the prices move up quite dramatically, right? The fact that there's low inventory and not a lot of demand happening right now, any pickup in demand is probably going to leave the inventory very short. If there is a short amount of inventory and an inelastic demand starting to pick up, you're going to see prices move. This could cause inflation to come back into lumber. Now, is it necessarily inflation or is it supply and demand imbalances? Who knows? But people will look at lumber, right, and say inflation is coming back. I'm looking at it more on the supply side of things, but I know I have to get this video out so that once this stuff starts to occur, we can come back to the video and say, hey man, you were either right or wrong on the situation. But anyway, I thought I'd give you guys the lumber update from the best position that I can from what I know. All right, uneducated economist, you guys let me know.